All right, we're going to build a node. This is node 1 and the front top. And this is really the only piece that goes with it, with the exception of there is a support gusset that goes inside of it. And that's one of the ones shaped like this, number 12. So we'll go over more details on the support gussets later. First, what we'll want to do is go ahead and score the bend lines on this part and cut it out. Now, I printed this without the bend lines well, not without any of the bend lines really, because it looks better once it's folded up to not have the black bend lines printed on the parts themselves. But it does make it trickier to find the bend lines if you're not familiar with where they're supposed to go. So refer to the instructions. There's the section that talks about how to build the nodes, shows an example of this part with the bend lines highlighted, so you can get a feel for where those are at. And then what I do, let's cut this one out here, so we're just working with that. And what we'll do is take a straight edge, and there's a bend line that runs essentially from that vertex there all the way to that vertex. So what we'll do is we'll just take a straight edge and lay it across there, get it to line up on that vertex there, and then run to this vertex here. And as soon as we've got that where we want it, I'll run my scoring tool across there. And that'll be one of our bend lines. Okay, so then there's going to be another one that runs here. You'll see there's a slight dip in the part there where the texture kind of cuts in at a little triangle between those two flaps. There's going to be a bend line right there that goes, so it's going to start here, go to there, and then there's another one that goes from that same vertex up to that vertex there. Same idea here, from this vertex down, there's another little notch in the texture between those two flaps there. So vertex from here to there, or a bend line from that vertex to there, and then one from here over to that vertex there. And then, of course, where all the flaps are, we'll need to score that as well. And then here and here, and then there's another bend line that goes from that vertex to there. So let's go ahead and do those. Oh, and there's one more that I didn't mention. It goes from there, that vertex there, down to there. Kind of bisects that shape there. Goes to the vertex between that large flap and the small flap. There we go. Now the rest of them are going to be for the flaps. So for these circular ones, I'm just going to freehand, and the bend line is essentially where the texture stops. For the bigger flaps, I will use the straight edge to help me put those bend lines in. I'm not as good at freehanding those longer edges. Okay, let me just double check, make sure I got them all. You kind of see how the light hits them, but I also like to just run the my little pick tool along, I can feel the edge, feel the scored line if it's there. So, okay, looks like I got them all. Oh, missed one right there, of course. Didn't even mention that one. So there's a line from this vertex to there. There we go. Okay, let's go ahead and add the coloring on these. It's just easier to do when they're before they're cut out. Let's see if this is a good color to match that. It's not too bad. And this is also what I'll use once we go and bend these, those sharp edges that'll result from the bends will, the texture of the paper kind of cracks and flakes right there, so you get kind of whitish edges. So I like to run the marker along that as well after it's been formed. Now, the program that I use to unfold these models, Papercraft Designer, it automatically cuts these flaps way back like that. And for some situations, like right here, where there's a tight corner, that's a good thing, because if the flap is, more trapezoidal like they normally are here, there's not enough room for that flap to fit in that short little space between the bends. So it makes sense to do it there. But then it'll do it other times here, where really there's enough space for the normal trapezoidal flap, because this edge is going to join up with that edge, right, when they fold together. So there's room for that flap there. So I found that I like to cut this more normal, more like the normal trapezoidal shape, just to give it more glue surface, because there's not a lot of surface there for it to glue. So this edge tends to not fit well if you follow the line as printed. And I like to mark it here with pencil just to help me remember to cut it that way. In fact, I'll go through all the rest of the parts in the stack on the other sheets and make that same correction there. And then here I'll do the same thing, because there's enough room there. Might have a little bit of a cutback, but not as drastic as what the program has done here. So I'll just kind of draw in. Worst case scenario, if once you trial fit this stuff, and if there's some interference with that flap and that edge there, then you can cut it back just a little bit more. Not a big deal. This one though for sure is going to need maybe not quite as drastic as what is drawn there. So I'll kind of, again, give myself a little bit more to work with, and I can shave that back if I need to later. The rest of them are probably fine the way they are on this part. You'll see some similar ones on the other node parts as well, but like I said, I'll go, once I decide to do that, I'll go through and mark the rest of the parts on the other sheets just so I don't forget. Because sometimes when I'm in the zone just cutting things, I'll forget that I decided to do that, and I'll end up cutting that off. And then once you cut it, there's no going back. So once you get to this part, don't forget to cut out that little tiny triangular notch there, because those two parts are going to kind of fold close together. They need to be able to do that. So you want to cut that out. All right, there we go. Now before I forget, I want to run the marker along these cut edges just to take that white off of there. And I'll do yellow along the yellow edges there. Okay, so we'll get this part bent, and then before we actually fold it up and glue it, we will want to take care of the gusset, and that has to go in a specific place. So I'll show you how to mark that, but let's go ahead and get this. I find it's easier to mark that after I've bent all the folds, so I'll go ahead and do that first. And I think it might be easier to bend the tabs first. And you can look at the instructions where it shows where the bend lines are at. It'll have the dashed lines. Most of these are going to be mountain folds, but there are some valley folds, so you'll want to be cognizant of that. I think on this node, everything is a mountain fold except for this flap right here is a valley fold. But you want to double check the instructions just to make sure I'm forgetting something. This is the final one. We'll fold down and it'll seal that up. But again, like I said before, we don't want to glue this right now because we have to get a gusset in there. If we don't have the gussets, the little internal supports, then these nodes are a little bit squishy, a little bit flexible, and they're easy to crush, especially when you're assembling all the nodes onto the spherical body and you have to put a little bit of pressure on them to get them to glue. They tend to crush. So, and then, even if they don't completely buckle in and get ruined that way, they kind of end up a little bit concave by the time you're done, and it just looks a little not great. So I decided to add the internal supports, and it helps a lot. So the way the internal supports work, let's get one of these out of here. They're all the same for the large nodes. These are the internal supports for the what I call the side nodes. These side nodes are the ones that have the recessed division in the middle. The one we're building here is actually this one right here, the one that has a little blue arrow on it. And so they have an internal support like that. The side nodes have two internal supports, well, four really, four each. There's one of these larger ones that are back here, and then one of these smaller ones that's right here. And I added extra support on these ones because you have to squeeze those two halves together in order to assemble it on the little recessed division. And so needs a little bit of extra support so they don't end up crushing. These ones are have just enough support so that you can kind of push them onto the ball to get them glued in place. We'll talk about those when we assemble one of the side nodes. So let's get one of those guys out and fold it up. So fortunately, these ones are completely internal. You can't see them from the outside, so we don't have to do anything special to pretty them up. You do want to kind of bend them as accurately as you can, so I'm not going to freehand these bends even though they're internal, because they do have to fit just right inside of the folded up node. And you know, if these bends are off too far, then they're not going to fit the place they're supposed to, and you'll just end up fighting them, trying to get them installed. So I am just going to use the straight edge for these bends. Okay, so the way this works, and you want to look at the instructions for this, it shows where these gussets go. They have to go in a specific spot in order to fit, right? You can't just go anywhere in here, because they have to contact the three sides. And if I put it too low, obviously it's not going to contact all the sides. It's got to be at just the right spot. And the instructions show where to mark and gives you dimensions. So if you follow those, you should be able to get that. And so they'll want to mark this face, basically all the faces where you're going to be gluing. So mark this face, and then of course this bends across, and this flap glues to this face, so we'll want to mark this face. And then this one folds over and glues to this flap, so we'll want to mark this face. And we don't need to mark these faces here because we don't need to glue there. Those just kind of fit in. They just fit as long as we folded everything correctly. So I'll go ahead and get those marked, and we'll go from there. So the instructions show how to mark the faces. They show basically what the node looks like from the outside, and there's a red outline along the face that you need to mark. So you find the face that has that particular shape. So there's one that has the red outline that goes along there. So you find that face. But what you're doing is you have to mark the inside, right? Because that's where the gusset is, or the internal support is going, is on the inside. So you need to know where to place it here. So you find that face, and remember you're marking on the inside. So for this face, what we want to do is the dimension is supposed to be 26.4 millimeters from this corner down, and then 14.8 millimeters from this vertex down. Now, if you can see the bend lines well enough, you can do that from the inside, which I think we can do here. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to measure from this corner here, 26.4 millimeters this way. So I'm going to, let's do it this way. Let's see that, yep. So from that corner, set this corner at 0. Need my pencil. And then 26.4. We're gonna have to eyeball that. Just put about 26.5 right there. Just make a little mark. And then from this corner, nope, this corner, 14.8. Yep, so from here, along that bend line, about 15. Make a mark there. Just double checking. Yep, looks right. 26 and a half-ish. 14.8-ish. Yeah, 15. Okay, so we marked those 2 points. Now we're just going to connect them with a line. Okay, there we go. Now, this face, same shape, right? It's just the opposite side of that, the mirror image. So we just use the same measurements. We just go 26.4 from this corner down, 14.8 from here down. Okay, so that's those 2 faces. Now we got to mark the third one, which is the large trapezoid in the back. What we'll want to do here is measure 23 inches straight down, and then 23 inches, and then it will also be 23 inches straight up. So this is basically halfway. I want to find the halfway mark there. Because, yeah, this face is 46 inches. Excuse me, 46 millimeters. That would be a big ghost. So, yeah, halfway is 23. So this one is a little trickier because it didn't give measurements along the side. 23 right there, so that's halfway. Okay, so now we've got those 3 edges marked. Then what we want to do is we'll want to go ahead and glue in the internal support before we start folding it up, obviously. And the way this is supposed to be, in order to get this in the right spot, what you want to do is make sure that the edge that you've marked, these lines, needs to line up with the bend line, the bent edge of the internal supports. So that means you don't line up the marked line with the edge of the flap like this. This is wrong. That'll put it in the wrong spot. You do line up the marked line with the bent edge there. That will put it in the right spot. Okay? And that goes for all of the marked lines should line up with the bent lines, not the outer edge of the flap. Now, whether you place it this way with the flap going up or this way with the flap going down, it shouldn't matter because this face ends up in the same spot regardless. The only thing with doing it upward is that it does taper, it gets smaller towards the top, so there's a potential you might run into some interference issues with the flaps. I don't think that would be the case on this large node, but on the side nodes that might be more of an issue there. But really, if you just want to avoid any of those, you just put the flaps facing down, facing inward. All right, so let's see, when we go to fold this up, this face is the last thing that we're going to close. right? So this is going to have be folded like that, and more or less like this. And then we're going to close this flap last. So I think what we'll want to do is we'll want to have the gusset already in place. Well, that, more or less. And then this will just close on top of the gusset with the rest of these flaps that are already there. So I think what we'll want to do is we're going to want to attach one of these faces first, either this one or this one. Probably this one, because when we fold that inward, it's going to fit nicely into there and help keep that flap folded up. Or if we do this first, we'd have to tuck that flap underneath there. Yeah, I think we'll do this one, the middle one first. So that's going to be this edge here. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to mark those just so I don't lose track. So this edge, just put a little X there, goes to this edge there. Now, you'll see that we do want to make sure that this edge, like I said, lines up with the marked line that we have here. So that'll locate it in this direction, but what about this direction? I think it's engineered with a little bit of a gap at the tip, so we don't want to push this tip, that vertex, all the way up into that corner there. I think that would not give us quite enough room to fold stuff. There's a little bit of a gap there. And you can't really push this vertex all the way up against this bend line, because as you'll notice, there's a bit of a corner cut right there. It doesn't, this edge and flap don't go all the way to the corners. It stops there, and then there's a bit of a back cut on both of these corners, and that is to accommodate the flaps that have to fold inward right there, right? So I made that so that it would accommodate those, because on the prototype that I built it all the way to the edge, and there was an interference in the flap here. One flap ended up being on top of the other flap, so there would have ended up being a bulge once this was all fit together. So I had to actually just manually do some cutbacks on those, which worked, but I didn't want to have to explain to other people that they had to do that, so I went ahead and built in these cutbacks so you don't have to put them in yourself. But you do have to account for them in the positioning, right? So that's why you can't push it all the way. That'll make this edge too far forward. So it does make this a little bit trickier in getting these lined up. I think if you go almost this vertex almost all the way to the front, but just pull it back a tiny bit, about a millimeter, pull it back about a millimeter, and then glue the edge there, and that should be good. Now, see, I've done that not quite right. I lined up the edge to the marked line, but this corner is way too far forward. So I gotta, yeah, see, that's putting kind of, I don't know if you can see that, but there's kind of a weird twist on it. It's not fitting right, so I gotta pull that off of there before it gets too glued on. And do it again, try again. I need this corner here of the internal support to be farther forward. So I need to make sure I try to get that right. That's better. These internal supports do make assembling these nodes trickier for sure, but they really do give it quite a bit more strength than they do without, so I think it's worth it. It's not too bad, but you can tell, hopefully you can tell, yeah, you can see where it's kind of bowing out there. It's because of that internal support is a little too far back this way. It's pushing that face out. I could probably get away with it, but I am going to just bend that in a little bit. Just force it back a little ways. Yeah, I think that's good. That'll work just fine. Once I glue that in, that'll hold position really well. But you can see I'm kind of pushing in a little bit there, and it's without that internal support, it would go concave quite a bit. So those internal supports really do help. Okay, I think we're ready to go ahead and close this guy up. Use the flat surface of the table to help me out a little here. That's how you build that type of node.